Hey, Drake in Summer here for our weekly cast of Get Resource, where we talk about anything that involves getting resource to yourself, source, and others instead of outsourcing your power. You're resourcing your power within yourself. And we always love to mention that subscribe, hit the like button to our YouTube channel at Get Resourced. And you can follow us on stream on Instagram as well as Facebook and LinkedIn. And we always like to open up with the question, what's alive in you, Summer?
Um, hmm. I just looking forward to our conversation. I always really enjoy them. I love the impromptuness. I love what I learn about you and the world, and excitement is what's alive.
Hmm, cool. Thank you for sharing.
What's alive in you today, right
Curiosity.
now?
Curiosity.
Oh,
Exploring our topic here today and seeing where that goes. Yeah, there's a lot of thoughts, opinions, and I look forward to unveiling it because
mm,
let's bring some conscious awareness to what is today. And today is Valentine's Day, and so that will be our focus of our topic today is to talk about Valentine's Day, unpack that. Where does that come from? How do I relate to it? How does Summer relate to it? And so yeah, we're gonna open it up. Valentine's Day today, February 14th. Hmm.
mm-hmm.
What do you know
What,
of Valentine's Day? Like what comes to you? Yeah. When you think
what do
of
we
Valentine's
know of it? Oh
Day.
man. Okay, personal experience. Anxiety.
Oh.
Anxiety fills my body with anxiety.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, if you're single, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't have a partner. I'm supposed to have a partner. Look at all these cute cards. People get flowers. You're supposed to give chocolate. Um, what if I forget and didn't appreciate someone who expects to be appreciated? Man, it's just like Christmas, full of stress and anxiety. That's what
Well, thank you. I think that's a great way to start is how it relates to us, right? How it relates to me. And yeah, when I think of Valentine's Day, I think pressure. There's an expectation as for me, what I determine myself as the guy to set something up, to set up a date, to go to a restaurant. I remember my past relationships. There was this I don't know, I create this expectation on myself. Um, Societal expectations of okay, I gotta book a, a a dinner at a restaurant, really nice fancy restaurant, and buy flowers, buy chocolate, not knowing the meaning behind it. Like I just kind of went with the crowd of what I thought was expected of me. And hey, it was a great time. It was like an intentional time where we got together and celebrated. But leading up to it, like it was this pressure and expectation and created anxiety for me. And my earliest memory of Valentine's Day was in grade school and elementary, where um, like it seemed like I had to buy Valentine Day cards and give these cards to like girls in my class that I liked or something like that. And there was also like fear and anxiety of like receiving a card. Like I hope I receive a card because if I didn't receive a card, what would that make me? Make me unlovable? Make me not attractive? Not liked? So there was a lot of fear around it. I remember in elementary. Oh, writing cards and stuff like that. Like I would think it would be like a something of a celebration of love and companionship and friendship, though I didn't feel that way. And I was curious to hear about like your childhood experiences of Valentine's Day.
interesting. The idea of feeling loved. It's kind of like Christmas, right? The most joyous time of the year, yet most people drink a lot, they eat a lot, they gain weight, they have high credit card bills and triggers. And actually often suicide are really high. So Valentine's Day, yeah, what is this obligation, duty driven, commercialized holiday? What does it actually represent? And for me in high school, I do remember those cards. I actually thought they were kind of cute. But yeah, you only get so many. So then who do you give them to and who do you leave out? And yeah, That's a and what an awful feeling if you don't get them. People again, school's all about competition and comparing and what would be nice is, teaching people how to express what they see in another person, what's interesting, what's unique, what's alive, and celebrating those things. Um, yeah. And then the candy and the chocolate again, it seems to go hand in hand with every celebration, candy and chocolate too. That's really interesting. Need to
Yeah.
have sugar.
Hmm. Yeah, it's natural in our capitalistic society for it to be commercialized. It's a money making holiday for sure. Any business in the chocolate making industry, flower industry, they probably one of the best days for their sales, right? And hey, that's totally fine. It just makes sense because it's something that we're all gathered around. So it definitely gets commercialized, right? We just live in a capitalistic society, and yeah, accepting that. Though I'm curious too, like how was that experience like receiving cards, giving cards? How was that like for you in elementary? If you're open to sharing, do you
You
remember any
know,
particular memories?
no, more like in high school, like I remember because I'm from Springbank and it was, a wealthier neighborhood. And for some reason that we had roses. I don't know if you did that. Did you do that in high school? So then the guys would have or buy roses and they would give them to girls. And I remember one
Like a
Valentine's
bachelor.
Day, like, yeah, yeah. So they brought the roses in, and then the guys would give them to girls. But there were some girls who didn't get any, and I got about six, and it didn't bode well for girls that didn't get any. The resentment, the hatred, the annoyance, the perturbance was really like it's gross. So I remember that one Valentine's Day, I was like, okay, well, you know what? I'm gonna give one of these flowers because I just didn't like that feeling. So I gave one of them to one of the girls who didn't get any, and the relief that she had that she just got something was really palpable. There was a lot of less let hatred and death stares coming towards me after that, but um, yeah, there's just something innately wrong about that. Innately wrong. Uh, and I haven't thought about that until you said, let's talk about this. And I haven't settled in on our culture's just skewed, is what what's coming to me right now. Did you used to like flowers, like giving flowers? I love flowers, but I don't like getting things where people feel like they have to. It feels so fake and so contrived and doing things out of obligation or duty. I much prefer you bring, sometimes you bring chocolates or things, or there's a surprise, or we go out for a dinner and it's surprised, or you express what you appreciate about me on a daily basis. Um, I find that to be more authentic rather than the prescribed dates, essentially.
Yeah, the Scribe thing is something that yeah, is not aligned with me because it creates pressure. Is that pressure to perform, pressure to um, follow rules and guidelines? Christine says that's so unfair.
I don't know what's unfair, but I have to say this because when you said pressure to perform, I was like, yeah, you know what happens when
No, it
there's
doesn't work.
pressure to perform? It doesn't work. No,
No,
it just
no, it
doesn't work.
doesn't work for me. Right. Though I do handle well under pressure, like work tasks and all that. But in terms of like love and in terms of connection, like um, that doesn't work because it's connected to my heart and it's connected to the sovereignty that I get to choose into it because I want to do it rather than being pressured to do it. So what I would have loved in school was, the space to communicate authentically because my whole life I was shunned from saying my truth, right? I didn't have a voice. I didn't know what my needs were. I told a line. I followed what was expected of me. And even with the girls that I like I was so afraid and anxious and scared to like share because I didn't know what my truth was. So I was just like, and then giving a car to someone, it's like this like fear thing, like, oh my God, I'm sweating. So I'd rather have like a conversation around like how to connect, how what is relationships like? What does a secure relationship look like? There was none of that in school. And none of that in my childhood household either. Sex wasn't the birds and the bee talk wasn't talked about either. And so there was a lot of shame and a lot of pretzeling, a lot of just distortions that kind of fed into the Valentine's Day because it was kind of sexualized or romance. And I was so awkward around romance, right? So it just helped kind of bring that out even more for me. And I rather like be in a space where, hey, if I want to give you a kiss, I'll give you a kiss. If I want to give you a gift, it doesn't have to be on a particular day. It's in that moment that I feel that's authentic to me that I want to express and be spontaneous about without the pressure and expectation is what I vibe with. And that's where I think you and I we align is that like we're not looking to a particular day to make something happen or anniversaries, right? Or certain spots in the calendar to create this. We just want to remind ourselves to like, hey, like being present and express that in those moments. Like yesterday, you bought me the chocolate mint Sammy. You came home with a treat. You gave me a cupcake from Food to Do with a heart on it and a chocolate Sammy. And like it's like those random gifts that I don't expect. Those that I really really appreciate. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Um, so interesting. It seems obvious, but yeah, in school, we associate Valentine's Day and we have all these commercialized things that come into school where the education is just so, it's like even schooling is commercialized. Like, you're right, we don't get taught relational skills. If anything, we get taught something against it, which is how to compete with others, which is how to put other people's down, how to divide people, how to make people feel less than. Um, it really speaks a lot about our culture that, I mean, never mind in elementary school, but I think as elementary school kids, really young, we sometimes know more than adults in a way of what seems fair and kind. And as we get older and older, there's none of that education. And I think the only reason why we've become um, educators in this area is because it's so lacking, and we were searching for it and coming into it and fascinated by it. And I remember looking at relationships of what they were supposed to be, the whole Hollywood movie, whatever Disney thing, and thinking and watching my parents who were divorced quite a long time and thinking, how do people do it? I'm so confused. How do people stay together? How do they have functional relationships? I thought that a lot in my head, like in my late teens, 20s, and even 30s. I was confused. I had no idea. None. I did too what I was supposed to do. And if I got into places that were difficult, there's triggers, fights, uncomfortableness, living like roommates. You have this spark and you're having sex for a while and then you don't. It's like, well, who knows what's going on and what's happening? Who teaches you that stuff? They teach you the anatomy. They don't teach you connection. They don't teach you reflection, um, honesty, integrity, like vulnerability. What that does that look like, and how can you be safe in that? Like, it's just so. It's almost like a black hole of,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, life is relationships. Like as I learn more about this stuff, like human beings are wired for connection, wired for relationship. Like they punish sociopaths by putting them in self isolation, right? Isolation to a human being is death. And so relationships, since it's the big thing for our survival, why don't they teach how to relate with each other?
Interesting
Relational
question.
dynamics, huh? Right? If I
Yeah.
learn how to
Mhm.
do that or communicate or learn about my attachment styles or, then I can better navigate the world and the people that are in my world. Though, yeah, none of that exists. And oh yeah, I want to speak to Shelly there. Awesome that you're taking a self-care day. Because Valentine's Day, like I remember when I was single, it was like what is it? Singles Awareness Day. That was it. I was like, oh yeah, I'm reminded that I'm single. And there's some shame with that, some like worthiness pieces of like, oh man, I want to be in a relationship. Though now it's like, I've done some work on it and I am in a relationship. Though it's like it can also be treated like a self-care day. Right.
Well,
And also
first love
looking
is
at,
here.
yeah, yeah. And like why not have a self-care day? Like it doesn't have to be February 14th or going celebrating as a couple and each other's love doesn't have to be February 14th. I mean, hey, if it serves as a reminder and there's some intention and a ceremony around it, amazing, right? Though I also like to invite in the conversation of like, what is it that I'm really celebrating here? Right? Is there some conscious awareness on this day? For me, I didn't have conscious awareness on what Valentine's Day meant. It was just this expectation of getting a card, setting up a date, getting chocolates, buying flowers, and making sure that I checked everything off so that made me a good man. That made me a good boyfriend, right? What does
And
a
if
good
it's
boyfriend mean? Man,
didn't do it, you would be shamed, and
oh
you're
my.
not a good husband. I'm sorry. And why didn't you do that? It's meaningful for me. And when you don't do it, yeah, there's a lot of ickiness in that.
Yeah, whenever there's a label of like what it means to be a good boyfriend, good girlfriend, good wife, good husband, like immediately there's like I should not be to be doing this. It's like the to do not list, right? And that shame and guilt cycle starts spinning again. So it's like, oh, it's such a low vibrational energy for me. Though if I have conscious awareness of coming in of like I want to celebrate this, it's my choice. It's a conscious choice rather than following along. But here's another kicker, where does Valentine's Day come from? How
Yeah.
often do I look into the history of it? In school, hey, they didn't teach me the history of Christmas or the history of Valentine's Day. Going back, right, to the etymology perhaps, or its origins, right? What am I truly celebrating here? Am I conscious, aware of it? Because I'm also giving energy to it based on how it's been morphed and changed over the centuries and decades, right?
Yeah, what did you find out? It's a little scary, and sometimes on the internet you don't know what's exactly true, but back in the days of yore, there's some pretty crazy stuff that went on. What's your summary of it?
Yeah. Well, it's quite
The
violent. I
prison
mean, we're
Romans.
we're we're quite violent people, right? I would say like all history points back to us being very barbaric. So basically, looking into it, I'm not an expert at this. Just looking into what I found and what I read is that Valentine's Day has its origins in the Roman pagan celebration called Lupercalia, and this involved sacrificing goats and dogs to this pagan god, right? This is actually Pan, a goat god, basically. And through the sacrificial of that animal, they would create a whip from a thong from the goat skin, and they would run around the streets drunk, whipping any woman they could find, and the woman will receive this because they believe that by receiving the lashings, it'll increase or make them fertile. So they'll expose bare skin to get whipped by these men in the streets. Also, they had a lottery, a matchmaking lottery, where the young woman in the villages and the towns will put their name in to be drawn randomly and paired up with another man. And they would be match made to do whatever they want on that day. Okay. And most of them, they ended up getting married. Right. So then you have this like festival full of lust and sex and whatever being celebrated originally from this Valentine's Day. Then it morphed into this, they tied it to this Christian priest, Saint Valentine's, who is just a priest wanting to get young men married because they wanted to. So they asked this priest to marry him. And the Roman emperor at the time, Claudius II, said, hey, you can't do that because we want strong men. And they believe strong men couldn't get married. That for men to go to war, be good soldiers, they couldn't be married. And so he got executed. And they tied that day to Saint Valentine's. So it's kind of interesting, isn't it? There's a lot of when you mentioned the deadly sins, right, playing a part in creating this holiday. It's very interesting as an invitation to look into truly what am I truly celebrating here,
And
right?
what do I want to celebrate in my life? Interesting because, and I always think, man, that's crazy. Looking 100 years from now, we'll think this world is crazy, and it is in a lot of ways a different level of violence towards ourselves and capitalism. I know in the Roman days there was a lot of lead, which in the water that led to their demise and to the excruciating violence of that culture that they had. So it makes sense to me they were that insane. But today, what kind of violence do we see? Um, People numb themselves with alcohol. They go out and uh, drink. I appreciated, we had a class last night and we're talking about attachment styles. And if people can't safely attach or relate to other people, they find other things to do: work, alcohol, these things that don't say no to them, that don't argue, that don't get triggered. It seems easy to have relationships with inanimate objects, especially things that will numb our emotions when we're not supposed to be feeling them. Growing up, the other thing they didn't teach us in school is what feelings were, what emotions were. We had vocabulary lists for all sorts of things for the clouds. I remember learning about cumulus nimbus clouds and types of plants, and in chemistry, plum bum for lead. But there was nothing about emotions or your body sensations or anything about this magical conduit that creates life. Like, it's almost insane. I mean, it is insane. I,
Well, disconnecting me from my power. I wonder
yeah.
why, right? You know, what if, believing in the world where we can be educated on learning how to use this, like this inner technology and how to relate to others around us? Wouldn't that be beautiful, right? When you mention about like the substances and like this distractions like alcohol or porn or drugs, like it's so easy to attach. And going back earlier, I was talking about how we're wired for attachment. Is that when I don't have that secure attachment of like going through a hard time and coming out on the other side okay, right? If that was not modeled for me or mirrored for me in my childhood, then I don't trust relationships, being in a relationship to go through a hard time. And so there's a liquor store over here, there's Netflix over here, right? There's that, Domino's pizza I can order right away. You know, there's so many conveniences for me to attach to get my needs met. So instead of attaching to a person to help me get my needs met, I attach to a substance, to food, to TV, to something that is not relational. And it feels secure and safe. Why? Because it doesn't reject me.
It's very
It doesn't
predictable too. When you
it
order
doesn't
Domino's,
come back to me.
pretty fast. Yeah.
It's predictable.
Yeah.
It's secure. It's consistent. It
Hmm.
shows up, right? If I order Domino's pizza, it's going to show up. So it's easy. So it becomes a pseudo attachment that I get my needs met, but it's never fulfilling. It's never full because it's not real. It's a false sense of security because it's just an experience. It's not relational. And everything that we do as human beings, because we're wired for connection, and that co-regulation is necessary for our survival, meaning regulating with each other's nervous system, then I'm not satiated, right? I'm always like looking for more. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to me in our culture that we're taught to dysregulate each other.
Mm.
We have no idea what's safe, secure, emotions and feelings. It's all about division judgment, expectation, obligation, duty, shaming, blaming, and all of these things that disconnect us. And how do we have good relationships when we're doing that?
Mm.
Makes it hard. And we're
Yeah.
just we're just giving cards that pretend that we feel something or what we think we should feel. But like I said, for 20, 30 years of my life, I was like, how does this work? Like, how does this work? And I believe tapping into ourselves first to figure out how our body works, to figure out how we work. There's lots of different things now that are starting to get into it. You know, somatic types of work, Marshall Rosenberg's work in nonviolent communication, Shirzad Shamin, my work in Inside Out. How does our body conduit work, and how is that in relationship to other body conduits, to these what they call meat suits? There's electromagnetic signals that come out of the heart. The only thing most people know about that is when it stops, they use electric paddles to get it going again. Well, how do we allow our heart signals to flourish without that? How can we tap into that? I mean, they know um, there's so much research on that. When someone dies and they have a heart transplant, the memories of that person, even the taste of the food that that person ate, is in that organ.
There's neurons in the heart, in the gut. Yeah.
And the gut. They say the gut is the second most, or actually has way more
More
neurotransmitters
neurons than
than
the
the
brain.
brain. And so there is so much information alive in our body that
Mm.
communicates to us and also communicates to others. I'm gonna have my phone off today. Um, that allows us to relate, to connect, to truly experience what they make Valentine's Day out to be. So, what kind of
Yeah.
things can we do to actually experience it rather than try to make something happen when we don't actually feel anything?
Yeah, to really be in love, right? Than to like think of love.
Mhm.
And what's interesting when you talked about the heart and the gut is that there's a there's a information highway called the vagus nerve. It's part of the
Mhm.
nervous system where there's more information coming up from the heart and the gut to the brain than the brain down to the heart and the gut, which means that the priority is the heart and the gut. Our
Yeah.
body is telling us that. When there's more information coming from the gut and heart up here than the other way around, right? That really means this is more important for us to pay attention to. And Brooke asks, how do we connect to someone that self regulates? How do we connect to someone that self regulates? And I think Brooke was talking within the context of um, perhaps that co regulation, right? Dysregulation piece. When I'm dysregulated with summer, like meaning I'm in fight or dysregulation, let's clarify that. Dysregulation is basically um, I'm not in homeostasis. Like I'm not in like calm and relaxation. It's my nervous system in a state of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Fawn is people pleasing. And immediately when I'm in that state, and let's say Summer triggered it, she's just the stimulus, then I'm in survival. So now I'm from her being a lover, a friend, an ally, she's now turned into an enemy, an adversary, just like that. Anyone experience that? Just a quick moment, your friend or your lover, you're like great vibes, and all of a sudden switches, and you want to get away from this person. That's what happens. And how do I connect? I'm not in a state to connect because I'm in a state for my uh, to protect my life, to survive, either by fighting, leaving, freezing, shutting down, checking out. So this is for me to indicate or know how does my body feel? What sensations are going on? Is my heart racing? Am I breathing shallow? Do I have sweaty palms? Do I have like judgmental thoughts? These are indications to let me know to regulate.
Yeah, I'm curious because I wasn't quite clear on what Brooke asked. Like, how do you connect to someone who is self-regulated, that's already self-regulated? Is that is that the question?
Yeah, I'm not sure. So I like to like
Maybe
kind of
Brooke
bring
can.
it down to a highway. And Brooke, please do clarify your question.
Yeah.
So for me to connect, like if that person is self-regulated, it makes it easy for me to connect, right?
Hmm.
Because they provide this safety for me. They're present, they're loving, they're compassionate. Okay. Though I know I don't want to put that on someone else, right? Where if I'm dysregulated, it's an indication for me to get back into regulation through my breath, taking a time out, walking in nature, taking a bath, going dancing, right? There's a variety of strategies that we all have that gets us back into alignment with ourselves. Then when I'm in that space, I'm able to have compassion, right? I have more capacity to see that person for who they really are, like not their judgments, but them as a human being with feelings and needs. And I have feelings and needs, and then we can connect, right? But it just takes one person. It just takes one person to be self-regulated, to stay in self-regulation, to inviting connection for the other person. And this is where co-regulation comes into play, right? We become tuning forks for each other.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, in our relationship, I I I I tend to be self-regulated most of the time, and so this is where the practice comes when people trigger us to coming back to this homeostasis, because as people are triggered, they mirror each other and they start to escalate each other, and that this is how fights triggers go up and up. And this is where self-awareness comes in, because if someone is really whatever, if we lived in the barbaric times of the Romans when they did all that stuff, it'd be even harder to figure out. But as someone gets triggered by something that happened in childhood, something that didn't allow them to stay calm, that scared them, that alerted them, some loud noise, a fight with their parents, something scary. The trigger is an opportunity that allows us to identify something in our body that is scary to it, that's coming up to be healed. So in that way, triggers are really a celebration. Oh, great, let's have a look at what's being needs to be healed. Most of us don't know how to stop and pause because it seems scary in the moment, and we end up judging it. Oh, look at this person. They're crazy, or they're thinking crazy, or whatever. Now, if we can just go, okay, I'm just curious. Oh, this person's freaking out, whatever. And if we've done our work, we can stay quite regulated, and we're curious, and we become this open space, because this kind of energy doesn't it can't last. It's too heightened, it's too revy. It'll eventually settle itself back down through the grounding, through the openness of this other person. And so most people try to meet these people with logic. Oh, well, you're doing this or whatever. And triggers are not a logical thinking thing, they are an emotionally felt thing. So if this person, and the thing is, when people are really triggered, they can feel judgments. They're in a heightened state of awareness for the other person's judgments and thoughts. All of us are empaths. And as soon as we feel or sense a look or anything, it just can escalate people. And so the power of curiosity and openness, knowing that the way the world we've been taught it isn't what it really. Our judgments do not reveal how we work as human beings. And as we can stay calm and observe, we start to learn how we really work. And people come back, and that's co-regulation. If someone can identify they're less triggered than the other one, and they can really settle themselves in, you'll see that this other person comes back and reconnects to themselves. There does need to be some awareness around feelings and needs, or journaling, or inner child work, or something often. And this is where parents, if they've been educated enough, children get to co-regulate and find these secure attachments by doing this kind of thing. Oh, my child's freaking out. We don't go, oh, you stupid girl, go in your room and close the door and shut it in beside yourself. You, oh, okay, I'll sit here till you're ready and I can scoop you up and maybe hold you and breathe with you. They find people who are in a coma. If someone's in a coma in bed and someone who's awake and their brain waves are regulating, they sleep with that person. The sicker person takes on the regulation of the more healthy person. Our bodies are geared towards health and regulation. I saw a video the other day of twins were born and they separate them at birth, and it was a miracle that one was really sick, and then they put the twins together and they healed. And I was like, oh, that's no mystery. Like, of course, you're gonna separate twins at birth and put them in separate places. Like, that's traumatic. And you put them back together and they heal together. Of course that happens. So just being in the presence of another
Presence.
open, non-judgmental person is healing.
Yeah, presence is the key piece. And just to, answer your question, Brooke, as you provide some clarity
Mm.
around like, oh, how do I connect to someone that's in a fight or flight? So they're
Oh,
dysregulated, right? So it just comes back to me of like, am I secure within myself? Do I feel safe despite what's going on outside of me? Let's say if like Summer is, let's say, angry or let's say irritated for a while there early on in our relationship, a trigger of mine was when Summer was expressive in voicing her irritation with technology. And immediately in my body, I felt this like the tightness of like, oh man, like I need to fix this because it's
mm,
making me uncomfortable. Because I also get irritated with technology, right? So I wanted to say, hey, babe, what do you need help with? Here, let me take a look. I would take over and figure out what was going on, try to fix it because I was uncomfortable with that energy that she was doing. So I wasn't in a way where I could hold space or create space for that to be present with that because there was a trigger within me. And so this requires me to take ownership of that. So it can be so difficult to be safe and secure with me because it's not an intellectual exercise. Okay. It's not about thinking about, okay, I'm going to be calm and collected, like cut off all my, that what comes to mind is me cutting off all my emotions and being numb.
mm,
I check out. Okay. If I use my head to not react, what's happening is that I'm checking out. I'm a robot. This is from my own experience. But when I'm actually really feeling it, and I work through this, where now Summer expresses her irritation with technology, I'm like, yeah,
sure.
it doesn't bother me anymore, right? Because I've worked with it, where this has come from, right? I've healed it, I've like unpacked it, so I become this safe space for her to go through a hard time and come out the other side okay. Just like as kids, I got an owie. I broke something, right? I'm crying. My dad says, "Shut up. Why'd you do this?" That's not going through a hard time and coming out the side okay. But what if my dad was just present with me, held me, allowed me to speak, allowed me to throw my temper tantrum, allowed me to express my anger and my sadness, and let that be fine. Then I know, oh wow, thanks, Dad, and I'm off onto the next thing, right? So for me to just be with someone that's, let's say, in fight or flight, it's presence. I got to recognize, am I thinking presence or am I being presence? Because if my body's reacting, I'm not present because there's a trigger there for me to look at and work with. Maybe a timeout, I need to go off and leave. But if it's clear conduit, then I can be there and let that person move through. That's co-regulation and get back into homeostasis. That's the beauty part, right? Empathy is not something to do; it's something to be. It's a quality of presence in the body, not a judgment of it, not thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe I'll further that, because you can't actually connect to someone in fight or flight. What you can do is connect to yourself, observe and wait. because eventually they come back, especially if they're in that heightened state. They're observing, they're watching what you do. And if you're like, oh, let me help you, or there's any anxiety in your own body, it creates this repulsion for them to come back. um, so the question is, how can I stay present with myself and check in, as Jay says, if there's a charge in there or this idea I need to fix something, it's going to create the exact opposite result of what we want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Christine, oh, thank you, Stephen, thank you for your comments there. Yeah. And Christine says, Dre, have you become indifferent technology? No, I still got work to do on that.
He gets more triggered than I do. The other day, actually,
Yeah,
he was
yeah. I blew up yesterday. There's something with this technology I was working with, and it didn't work according to plan. And I vented. I vented out loud on myself. It was a cathartic release, and fortunately, I had spaces to allow that thing to move through. But more recognition, because Summer told me that it affected her nervous system, and that's reflection for me of, oh wow, um, this idea of unbridled self-expression, right, can be damaging, especially like name calling, speaking out judgments, telling it as it is, right, without awareness of the consequences and effects of another person. So that's something for me to be aware of, was like when I'm venting, if I'm by myself, sometimes saying swear words really help me. They do. Like, I actually love to swear when I'm angry. It's actually helps me move it, and a recognition that I got some work to do on that piece. Though if Summer's in the vicinity, in the environment, her sharing her feelings and needs around my behavior is now bringing awareness. Oh, okay, thank you, because I don't want to affect her negatively. I don't, right? At the same time, so for me to be aware of that, of like, okay, how is my behavior affecting the people around me too? So still a work in progress. Yeah, I know I've done a lot of work with Summer being irritated with technology. I still got some work to do with myself, being irritated with technology with myself. Yeah.
right, and that's also feelings and expressing them. We can experience all range of emotions, and sometimes it's often actually very useful to have a witness, to have people that can hold that container. And there's also a skill in being able to feel and fully express and explore something in ourselves without projecting it outwards. It's not necessary to project it in a way that affects someone negatively. It's really not necessary. In between that, it takes a few different developmental skills, I would say, because often if we fawn, if we're people pleasers or pretzlers or people who haven't learned to express, we have to go through these different ways until we find something that's authentic, that really works for ourselves, but that also helps us connect in relationships that isn't scary. And again, it's just skill. Um,
Yep. A
yeah.
practice of like bringing it back home. And I love Stephen. Beautiful summary of that piece of like, all I need to do is take care of me.
Yep.
That's it. I'm not here to fix someone else. I'm not here to make it right. Right. I'm not here to like go. No, no. I just got to check in with myself. And I know when I'm safe and secure. Right. I know that my heart slow down, deep breaths. I'm open. I know when I'm safe with myself is when I'm open. So the invitation here is for me to self connect to myself. Right. I love Marshall's work is adding another piece to it. Is like, yeah, what am I feeling and needing? We do a practice, right? Somewhere of like expressing judgments, like la 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 la, right? And then out of those judgments, I then now see clearly of what I'm actually feeling and needing. Because the judgments are this cloud, right? And when I express it, like it helps part the clouds and the sun starts shining through. And then when I connect to like, it can, yeah.
I mean, if you know what feelings and needs are, most people don't have that vocabulary. That's why it's super important to learn it. But yeah.
Yeah, the vocabulary. Well, speaking for myself, when I connect to that, then all of a sudden I have increased capacity to hear the feelings and needs of others. Because I know one of the biggest conflicts of people is both people wanting to be heard,
It's
right?
true.
Yeah. And employing strategies that further disconnect rather than connect. Yeah. Yeah. The saboteur strategies that is. So yeah, all I need to do is work on myself. That's it.
Yeah.
And if you're in a relationship, same thing. My goal is I work on myself. And that's an invitation because my beloved, my partner is going to see that growth. And
Mhm.
they get to choose. They get to choose to grow alongside me or stay the same. And then we grow apart. It is what it is.
This is where trust in the universal design of your life comes in, and living authentically, not out of fear of losing someone or doing stuff and pretzeling. When people are trying to be heard, they want the other person to hear them, and they're both outsourcing their power. If they both look inward and hear themselves, then they're most able to then hear where that other person is coming from. When we're asking other people for something, we actually don't know what we're asking because we're not connected to who we truly are. We have no idea. We're usually doing something culturally ingrained that isn't really in service to who we truly are.
Yeah. Mm, love this. Yeah. And we're coming to time here. Um, anything you'd like to say to kind of bridge everything back together?
I'll just make a face. Um, just oh, we didn't say that. Like, it's Valentine's Day. Dre and I don't even remember what day we started dating. We don't even celebrate our anniversaries. Um, and people are like, "Whoa," because I mean, I remember being in other relationships. And, okay, I'll wait for the next. Oh, we've made it this far. We've made it. It's this check mark checklist. It's kind of like people like, well, you did the garbage and you took out the whatever. Um, it's so exhausting. Um, and I guess when you're in a relationship that is free, that feels good, that is life giving, time doesn't really exist. And you don't measure it based on what our culture tells you to. Um, so that's why we don't even
Yeah.
measure
Well,
that either.
I say it because I'm grateful for the intentional space that we created for each other to be in a space of like checking in with each other, doing work that we love. I can imagine, if I'm so busy working a job and my partner is as well, you know, it could be all about work and taking care of the kids, taking care of errands, and we can forget to love each other, and I can see how Valentine's Day or anniversaries can be reminders to come back into, yeah, right, like being with each other. So, um, I think that's the intent I like to leave with is like creating intentional space to
Hmm.
love each other, to remember each other. Um, yeah, to be in that essence of like relational connection. So whatever that looks like, if that is a reminder in the calendar to make it work, to create that intentional space, great. Or if it's like spontaneous, blend that in too. Cool. Though more spaces like that, rather than for me prescribing myself to an expectation and then having to perform, because now it just doesn't feel authentic. I'm just doing it to be a good boyfriend, a good husband, right? I got to be conscious of, okay, where is this coming from? Is it an obligation, a duty, or is it like because I want to? And you get
Yeah.
to.
Another thing, I appreciate what you're saying because we a lot of people talk about gratitude journals and they write about what they're grateful for. A great practice for couples is, what are you most grateful for today? And that's not necessarily just with each other, but that often just comes out naturally as people start to think about what they're most grateful for. Because often when couples, when we're in these fight places, it's like, well, what are my grievances? And I'm going to complain about my grievances rather than what we're grateful for. And
We have these empowerment rituals that we use at the start of the day and at the end of the day as well. And if that interests you, reach out to us, send a message, and we'll send it to you. It's worked well for us.
yeah, they're just questions, but it's
Mhm,
thoughtful questions that most people don't think to ask.
mhm. Beautiful. Okay, we'll wrap up. Enjoy the
Happy
heart-filled
Valentine's
day.
Day, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, and see you again next week. Next week, we are planning to have a men's coach that works with men with ADHD. So anything around that, bring your questions. Uh, if
Mm.
you think you have it or you've been labeled as one, come with the questions. It's a beautiful topic because it does seem like I judge that people are talking about. It
Yeah,
does seem like
ADHD, it's a big
everybody
thing.
has it, especially, I mean, maybe we're just drained because of like the instant gratification, the amount of apps and tabs and busyness that's happening. Cultivates a lack of presence, right? So I'm like, oh, man, yeah, I can't focus. Perhaps the technology is changing my brain to be less focused. So yeah, we love to chat about that. So next week, Friday, 12 p.m. Follow us on YouTube at Get Resourced if you haven't already. We would love for your support to help get this message out. And yeah, we'll talk to you later.
Yeah, sounds good. Yay.
Okay.
Bye,
Ciao.
everybody.